Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Mr. Muhammed is here. This is Oxford Complete Mathematics for IGCSE students, Unit 6.4. So previously we learned how to use sine, cosine, and tangent to find missing signs and missing angles in right-angled triangles. Today we are going to talk about sine, cosine, and tangent in different fields. So we start by the angles that they have equal sine and cosines. So easily, the sine of any angle is equal to the sine of 180 minus the same angle. How? Sine of 30 is equal to sine of the angle which comes from 180 minus 30. 180 minus 30 is equal to 150. So the sine of angle 30 is equal to the sine of angle 150. So let's check this on calculator. So sine of 30 is equal to 1 over 2. What about sine of 150? It is also 1 over 2. So this is always right. The sine of any angle, sine of x, is equal to the sine of 180 minus the same angle. It's always true. Let's have another example. Sine of 60 is equal to sine of 180 minus 60 is equal to 120. So sine of 60 is the same as sine of 120. Let's check this on calculator. Sine of 60 is equal to this, the square root of 3 over 2, or as decimal it's equal to this. What about, now this is easier to memorize. What about sine of 120? Same. So remember, sine of any angle is equal to the sine of the angle that comes from 180 minus the angle. For cosine, it sounds similar, but for cosine, only one negative will be added to the result. How? So as you see here, these given examples, cosine of 150 is equal to negative cosine of 30. So cosine of 30, when we subtract 30 from 180, the result is 150. So since the difference between these two, look, when you add them, it's 180. So the cosine of this one is the negative of the cosine of the other one. So the same thing is right about any two numbers that they add up to 180 together. For example, 180, if we subtract 10 from 180, so we see it will be 170, and the other one is 10. These two angles together, they add up to 180. So cosine of this angle is equal to negative cosine of 10. So let's see, using calculator to check this answer. Cosine of 170 is equal to this, negative 0.9848. What about, look, even this negative is here, remember. What about cosine of 10? Negative cosine of 10, so there must be a negative. As you see, cosine of 170 is equal to negative cosine of 10. Why? Because 170 and 10 together, they add up to 180. Then look, the exact same number, negative 0.98 98480, and so on. As you see, this is the cosine of 170, same result, and this is the negative cosine of 10. As you see, it's the same result. Now, based on what we learned from here, so remember, for sine, any two angles, when they add up to 180, their sines are equal. Any two numbers that they add up to 180, their cosine, the first one is the negative of the second one. We can also say the cosine of this number is negative of the cosine of the other number, because these two numbers together, they add up to 180. Now let's do question 1 and question 2 here. Question 1 says, use a calculator to find the cosine of all angles 0, 30, 60, 90, 120. These three dots means going by 30 until 180. Then part B, draw a graph of y equals cosine of x. Then we're going to use the table for part B. Now part A, let's just do it. Part A, cosine of these numbers. Part A, cosine of 0. Cosine of 0 is equal to 1. Cosine of 30, we're going to use calculator for them. Cosine of 60. Cosine of 90. Cosine of 120. And then cosine of 150. I want to save the space to draw the graph, and cosine of 180. Now with calculator, cosine of 0 is 1. It's already done. Cosine of 30 is equal to the square root of 3 over 2, or it's 0.866, and then cosine of 60. It is 1 over 2, 0.5. Cosine of 60 is 0.5, 1 over 2. Cosine of 90, 0. Cosine of 90, 0. Cosine of 120, it's negative 1 over 2. We can say it's negative 0.5. Look, we just got the relation. 120 plus 60 will be equal to 180. So the cosine of the first one is equal to negative of the second one. You'll see more. Cosine of 30 is equal to 0.866. So 30 plus 150 will be 180. So cosine 150 must be the negative of this number. Let's see. Cosine of 150, it is negative 0.866. This is positive. This one became negative. And cosine of 180 is equal to negative 1. How I know? Because 180 plus 0 is equal to 180. Cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of 180 must be the opposite of the one, which is negative 1. Let's see. Cosine of 180 is negative 1. Now part B says draw a graph of y using cosine of x from 0 to 180. From 0 to 180, we have all the cosines. Use a scale of 1 centimeter to 30 degrees on x-axis and 5 centimeter to 1 unit on y-axis. Look, the largest number we have for y, these numbers, these results, they represent y. The largest number is 1 and negative 1. So the y-axis should be 10 centimeters according to the scale the question wants, and 1 centimeter to each 30-degree angle. Then to do this, we need an xy axis. We just draw the xy axis. Now let's mark the angles that we work on. The first centimeter, the center is 0. Here is 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. And 0 is in the center. We got the angles. Here is 1, as the question said, 5 centimeters to 1 unit. And here below is -1. Now let's plot some points. The first point, we have 0 and 1. Cosine of 0 is equal to 1. So 0, which is here on x-axis, 1 on y-axis, 0, 1 is right here. Then 30, 0.866. 30 is here, 0.8. Look, until here is 1, so it means each line here is 0.2. Then 2, 4, 6, 0.8 is here, 0.86 is more than half, so it's around here. 30, 0.866. Then we have 60 with 0.5. 60 and 0.5. 0.5 is halfway. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 squares, so 2.5 is halfway. Opposite 60, so it's here. Then we have cosine of 90 is 0, so it stays here. This is 90, 0. And then cosine of 120 is -0.5. Then here is 120, -0.5 is halfway here. Then we have 150. Cosine of 150 is equal to -0.866, which is, here's -1, -0.8 is here, 0.86. So it's around here. And 180 has the cosine of -1, then 180 is here, -1. So the curve looks like this. This is one pattern of the graph of cosine, as we used to follow the points. So the graph of cosine from 0 to 180 looks like this. Remember, graph of cosine never changes. This time it's the same idea, but this time we need to do it for sine. Look, draw the graph of y is equal to sine of x using the same angles and scale in question 1. So we're gonna find cosine. We got the cosine of all the angles. Now we're going to find the sine of all of these angles. Okay, then sine of 0 is equal to 0. Then 0 plus 180. Look, these two numbers together, when you add them, it's 180. So their signs are equal. Sine of 180 is 0. Sine of 30, using calculator, it's equal to 0.5. Then sine of 150 is also 0.5. Let's see. Sine of 30 is 0.5. Then 30 plus 150, they add up to 180. So sine of 150 is also 0.5. Sine of 60 is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Sine of 60 is equal to square root of 3 over 2. Or as decimals, it's 0.866. 60 plus 120, they add up to 180, so their signs are equal. Let's just check. Look, it's equal. Sine of 90 is equal to 1. Done. We got all the results. Now we are ready to draw the graph of sine. So 5 centimeters. There you go. And 7 on the other side. Okay, ready. Now let's start plotting. Sine of 0 is 0. So 0, 0 is one of the points. Then the first one is 30. Let's write the angles. 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. So sine of 30 is 0.5. Here is 1. 0.5 is halfway here. Sine of 60 is 0.866. It is around here. And sine of 90 is 1. And then 120 is again 0.866. And sine of 150 is 0.5. Sine of 180 is 0. Look, sine of 150 is 0.5. Now, by joining all of these points together, we will get the graph of sine. This graph is for y equals sine of x. And that's how we do it. The graph of sine between 0 to 180 is like this. Here we go. This is the graph of sine, and we drew the graph of cosine. Question 1 and 2 done. Now let's move on to question 3. Question 3. Sine of 18 is equal to 0.309. Give another angle whose sine is the same, 0.309. Now think, 18 plus which number will be 180? 18 plus 162 will be equal to 180. So the sine of 18 is exactly the same as the sine of 162. This is the angle 162 degrees. Why? Because 18 plus 162 is equal to 180, and for sine, the angles that they add up to 180, their sines are equal. For cosine, the angles that they add up to 180, their cosines are equal, but one of them is negative, one of them is positive. Question 4. If the sine of 27 be equal to this, 0.454, give another angle whose sine is the same, 0.454. Now think, 27 plus which number will be 180? Or 180 minus 27 is equal to 153. So 153 is the angle that has the same sine as 27. Because when we add this angle with this one, they add up to 180. Just like the rule. Give another angle which has the same sine as 40. So 40 plus which number will be 180? 140. So the sine of these two angles are equal. 70 plus 110, they add up to 180, so their sines are equal. 130 plus 50 is equal to 180, so the sine of 130 is equal to the sine of 50. Question 6. Cosine of 70 is equal to 0.342. Give another angle whose cosine is negative. An angle that has the same cosine but negative, not positive. Then for cosine, any two angles that they add up to 180, their cosines are equal, but one of them is negative, one is positive. 70 plus which number will be 180? Of course, 110. Then cosine of 70 is equal to this number. Cosine of 110 is equal to the negative of this number, which is negative 0.342. Let's check this using a calculator. Either is it true? Cosine of 110, definitely it's equal to negative 0.342, just like the question. Question 7 to 10 are your tasks. You can do it because we studied what you need to do these questions. Question 11, if the sine of x be equal to 0.35, find two solutions for x between 0 and 180. Look, when you look at this question, straight away we can see that the angle is missing, so we can use sine inverse to get the angle. Then sine inverse of 0.35, sine inverse of 0.35 is equal to this, 20.48. Now 20.48 is an angle that has this sign. 20.48, basically we can say it's nearly 20.5. 20.5 plus which number will be 180? So it's 159.5. 180 minus 20.5 is 159.5. So the two solutions for here, one of them x could be 20.5, the other one x could be 159.5. Now we got two solutions for x, two answers that they both give this angle in sine function. Find two solutions of the equation cosine of x to the power 2 is equal to 1/4. Cosine of x all to the power of 2 is equal to 1/4. This is something we want to solve. It's just like a normal equation. We want to solve this. If we want to solve this, the first thing we do, we have to remove this power 2. This power 2 should be removed. Then how? Power 2 could be removed by taking square root for both sides. Now, the square root of cosine of x all power 2 is equal to the square root of 1/2. We just took square root for both sides. Then on the side, the square root will be cancelled with this power 2. On the other side, the square root of 1/4 is equal to 1/2. Because the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 4 is 2. And on the side, we have cosine of x. Cosine of x is equal to 1/2. So we need to use cosine inverse to find the angle. Then cosine inverse of 1/2 or 0.5, both fine, both work. So we can say 1/2. It's totally okay. Cosine inverse of 1/2. Why we need cosine inverse? Because we know the result, but we don't know the angle. Then cosine inverse gives us the angle. The angle is 60. So x could be equal to 60 because cosine of 60 is 1/2. And there's one more thing that we have to know about cosine. Cosine of positive and negative angle gives the same answer. For example, cosine of 45 is exactly the same as cosine of negative 45. So these two angles, look, they are, one is negative, one is positive. If we ignore the sign, they are equal, so they have the same cosine. This property is only true for cosine. For sine, the angles that they are only their signs are different, they don't have the same sign, but for cosine, they have the same result. Now let's check this. Cosine of 45 is equal to the square root of 2 over 2. What about cosine of negative 45? It is the same. Look, although there is a negative here, but it doesn't affect the answer for cosine. But for sine, it affects the answer. So based on this property, here, can we straight away get the other value of x? Yes, negative 60. 60 and negative 60, they both have their cosine 1 over 2. Cosine of 60 is 1 over 2 or 0.5. Cosine of negative 60 is also 1 over 2. But this property is not true for sine. So remember, cosine for any angle, cosine of, let's say, 60 is the same as cosine of negative 60. But for sine, it's different. For sine of 30 is not equal to sine of negative 30. The results, this result is positive, this result is negative. If this result be negative, this result will be positive. It means they never be equal. But here, they are always equal because cosine doesn't care about the sine of the angle. It gives the same result. But sine do care about the sine of the angle. If it's negative, it's a result. If it's positive, it's another result. So what we learned in this tutorial, two angles that they add up to 180, they have the same sine. Two angles that they add up to 180, their cosines, one of them is negative, one of them is positive, but it's the same number. Cosine for two angles like this, when one is negative, one is positive, their cosines are equal. Their cosines are equal, but for angles that one is negative, one is positive, their signs are not equal. These 4 points are the most important things in this tutorial. I hope you find it easy. Thank you for watching.